So Cyberpunk 2077 is finally out, and although I'm still making my way through it, I've put in around 30 hours and wanted to give my impressions, a review in progress if you will, and to say that CD Projekt Red's new game has been hit with several issues and problems, and when I say that, it's a bit of an understatement. But do these issues bring the entire package down overall, and how will it perform for you on your system of choice? Now, my entire playtime has been on the Xbox Series X, with a little on the Xbox One S as well, and I'll be predominantly focusing on the Series X though, and my first-hand experience with it. There's a ton of videos and articles out there on how the game is on all platforms, but I wanted to also discuss the game itself, its story, its characters, its systems, the mechanics, and the open world itself. To be upfront about where I currently stand and what I think of Cyberpunk 2077 so far, then it's been an enjoyable and hard to put down game, and the reasons why that is I'll get to, but there's no ignoring the fact that extra dev time would have been a positive thing as the game is plagued with technical issues, both big and small. But online discussion or arguing in social media can sometimes blow things out of the water, where certain games must be the greatest thing ever or they're the worst thing ever. There's a huge middle ground area to discuss when it comes to Cyberpunk, but I don't think another 6 to 12 months in the oven would miraculously fix all the issues across all platforms and we would be left with a perfect game. Not even with the extra time. This would still have problems, especially on last gen consoles. But if you like the video, then please like, share, comment and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on Cyberpunk down in the comments and what issues you've had and what system you're playing it on. But now let's travel to Night City and see how the successor to The Witcher 3 begins its life. So we just have to start with the visuals and performance, and it's where the internet and social media is melting down the most, and this comes down to my personal experience with playing Cyberpunk and the experience that others are having across various platforms. And no matter how many people defend the problems, how they will be patched over time or anything else, what we see is what is happening. Cyberpunk has numerous bugs which I've encountered firsthand, but not to the level as what others are reporting. The performance and issues can also be split between launch day and how the game is performing after the patch came out, and I'll say that stability in both quality and performance modes increased, and many of the freezes and crashes I had on the Series X all but went away. Prior to that, the game would often hang and freeze whilst driving around or during cutscenes. It seemed totally random, and in one instance it happened at what was probably the most important part of the whole game up until that point. The performance mode on the Series X tries to hit 60 frames, and it can, but I often found it dipping regularly under that mark, and the same went for quality mode, albeit at 30 frames a second and slightly under. But once the patch dropped, especially, I found that the quality mode just looked excellent, and there was a difference between it and the performance mode, with higher detail in what seemed like everything, improved lighting and reflections, higher details at distance, and possibly more environmental detail, such as more pedestrians and cars, especially in certain parts of the city, but I can't confirm this for sure. But then when we look at the performance mode, you get up closer to that 60 frames mark, and it's just sometimes a lot smoother than that quality mode. So it's a toss up between, do you prefer the visual fidelity or do you want higher frames? And during my playtime in making this video, I constantly switched between the two. So overall, performance and visual fidelity is quite good on the Series X, and remembering this is just the backwards compatible version of the game. But in terms of performance, those playing on the base Xbox One or PS4 aren't going to have a good experience, as those versions are simply plagued with frame rate issues, blurry visuals, and overall lack of detail. And even if the game was delayed further, I don't see these versions ever performing at a level that many gamers would deem acceptable. Really, if this is your only way to play the game, then I suggest to wait until a time where you upgrade your PC or purchase one of the newer systems. PS4 Pro and Xbox One fare a little better from what I've seen, but I haven't had any time playing on those systems, plus I don't want this video to get bogged down in comparisons. I'll make it known though that it's a good idea to go into the settings and turn off motion blur, film grain and chromatic aberration, as I found doing this made the game look a lot more improved with a touch more clarity as well. But I've had more bugs than the freezes though as well. Nothing that broke the game too much, and a simple reload would fix the issue, but these shouldn't be happening at all and in these numbers and need to be fixed, and they seem minor compared to what others have experienced. I had an assault rifle which would fail to fire when aiming down sights. My car hit the curb at only a few kilometers per hour and it flipped into the air for no reason. I was killed trying to stop a group of criminals, but when I reloaded from the last checkpoint, my car was vertical against the fence for some reason and was about to explode, and I had to quickly jump out. My character would move incredibly slow sometimes, like he was over encumbered, but he wasn't. Again, a reload fixed the issue. I've seen characters sliding instead of walking, and one of the, I guess you'd call them boss fights, just saw him glitch in and out of the scene as I kept shooting him and he eventually died. I had info boxes remain on screen and wouldn't go away, disappearing cars, subtitles would automatically turn back on even though they were off. Plus I had 2 hard crashes to the dashboard. Now these next 2 issues weren't exactly bugs, but they need improvement, and that's the menu text, which is too damn small, especially when sitting a few meters away from the TV. And the other is a control scheme problem, where the button you double press to dodge is also the crouch button, plus the button to skip through dialogue. And these reminded me of another addition we need, and that's to have weapons be able to be sorted in the menu instead of scrolling through too many different types. But in terms of the dodge button, that is just way too much for one button to do, especially when it interrupts combat and cutscenes. All of these will likely be patched fairly soon, but they shouldn't really be there to begin with, especially as the issues with the game, from all reports, get a lot worse than just these. But all of these happened at least once in my around 30 hours of playtime, and of course there's going to be problems due to what's been happening this year, but it's just unfortunate that Cyberpunk launched in this way. In terms of graphical quality on the Series X, then it's a great looking game overall, and at certain times it's just jaw-dropping. As mentioned earlier, there is a difference between quality and performance mode when it comes to details, but since the patch I've been playing mostly in quality mode so as to see this futuristic open world in all its glory. Now of course, I'd prefer a stable 60 frames a second and usually choose that option, but I'm not the type of person to think that any new game running at 30 is some sort of technical tragedy that I can't overcome. But in this type of open world RPG, it's fine, but I hope it can improve when the next gen patch drops, and when you switch it over to performance mode, you definitely see the increase to 60 or close to it. But since I brought up the world itself, then let's focus on that, and there is just so much detail crammed into every area that makes it believable, with trash lying around everywhere, items scattered around alleyways, long since forgotten buildings and machinery out in the Badlands, and how the gorgeous lighting, whether from sunlight, seems to just make the visuals pop, or how we see almost the bleeding effect from neon lights at night as it's reflected from rain-soaked streets. Looking at the large buildings head up into the sky with the billboards attached to them as they slowly rotate, or seeing the lights extend up into the sky from a distance when you're in the countryside. Seeing how these buildings are a part of the cityscape, complete with large motorways and walkways which combine to allow our traversal through this metropolis. It's beautiful to see, and of course it's only made better should you have a PC that can run it with all the bells and whistles, or at least playing on the more powerful consoles. I really liked being in the building, such as your apartment for example, and being able to see the outside city as well. Seeing this in any game makes the world more believable, like it exists even when you're not there. On the Series X though, you'll have the countless opportunities to take photos and videos as you let your eyes soak in the details from the world itself, to the detailed weapons and reload animations, through to the various car models and how their exterior and interiors seem familiar, but with their own cyberpunk twist. Texture quality is very good overall, but you will see some very low textures when looking for them, or text on the vending machines around the place. But even some of the electronic signs don't hold up that well at closer inspection. And just to touch on the music, which you'll hear a lot of in the car, there is quite a wide variety of electronic heavy rock as well as a more dance-like music, so there is a bit of something for everyone, but my favourites were anything which reminded me of the Blade Runner soundtrack. Driving around at night, neon signs everywhere, raining, and even just turning off the radio altogether to take in the sights. It's simply great so far, but want to listen to more of the soundtrack as well. The animations of the main characters you get to interact with is excellent, whether it be the facial expressions and lip movement, which isn't the best I've seen, but the quality extends to their body movement, and this is something Deus Ex did sometimes as well. When talking to characters, whether standing or sitting, they gesture and move subtly instead of having just a talking head and everything else about them is stagnant. They move their hands, touch their face, nervously move their leg or change seating position, and this can extend to background characters to where they do the same thing, just on a bit more of a minor scale. This is taken down a few steps when we start to focus on the hundreds of NPCs that we see around the place, but in which they are definitely a required part of the game world, but they lack in the AI department, where we can't have meaningful interactions with them and the behaviour can be somewhat lacking, or how they don't really have any schedules, they seem to not really be doing anything, or how it doesn't seem to bother anyone when you steal things right in front of them. It's as if they're just wandering around with nowhere to go until they sometimes just turn around and walk back again. Or how we can click the button to talk to some, including street vendors, but it really doesn't go beyond this very basic level of interaction. Getting harassed by the police when committing a crime doesn't require you to do anything more than simply driving away, as they don't chase you at all. For this example, I'd like to know if this was a design decision and how it fits with the Cyberpunk lore, or maybe they only patrol certain areas only in the city, as maybe it's so full of crime that many crimes just get pushed to the side. But I did notice that hitting or running over a pedestrian could make the police simply appear out of nowhere sometimes and start shooting. In any case, Cyberpunk isn't really an all-encompassing and truly interactive open world when it comes to being able to interact with each citizen. But even without these things, Cyberpunk is an excellent and enjoyable experience. But when we focus on the main narrative and the characters, then I just can't help but be invested in what I'm playing, as the world of Cyberpunk is something I've always wanted to play through, and having this branching narrative is something I've always wanted. Even just wandering around, reading the bits of information you find that can flesh out the world, especially for someone like myself who isn't familiar with the source material. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't finished the game and do plan on having another playthrough with a different build, so the extent to which dialogue options play a role in changing things in the story or your relationship with other characters is something I'm not sure of yet, but the ones I've been introduced to and interacted with have all been written and voiced very well, with their own personalities, traits and demeanour. Genuinely interesting characters. But even if they don't offer too many differences, even just playing it once, as most gamers will, I'm satisfied in what I've experienced so far, and it's just a whole lot of fun to play. Being an RPG as well, as you play, you'll gain experience and unlock perks to spend on acquiring more quick hacks, for example, or upgrading your handgun proficiency. But you'll also be spending points in 5 different categories, such as body, reflexes, technical ability, intelligence, and cool, and which ones you favour will contribute to the build that you're going for, plus also offer meaningful skills, such as being able to open certain locked doors. Now, going into this in depth is a whole nother video on its own, as each category can be broken down into multiple subcategories as well. So apart from the main campaign, there are a multitude of side missions dished out from what are called fixers, and who will usually call you when you enter a new area or district, and other side content to do, such as helping out the NCPD and taking care of gangs. These are similar to Outpost in a Ubisoft game, except they are on a much smaller scale and can be completed much quicker. And I like this, as it kept the game going at a good pace, and I never felt like I was bogged down and just forced to do these activities. And that's one part due to them mostly always rewarding you with new gear, and that's one part due to these mostly always rewarding you with new weapons, gear or currency, and because of the gunplay itself. Now, this isn't the best gunplay that I've played, but when taken into consideration that it's CD Projekt Red's first foray into anything to do with a first-person shooter, then they've done well to get it to even feel even remotely good. Sure, it can feel a little floaty at times, but I always found it to be very satisfying, mostly due to the great lineup of guns you can use, which often feel unique, but also sound fantastic with beefy sounding shotguns, or even the pistols, which I wanted to specialise in, and which all have a number of differences between them, such as single or multi-shot bursts, plus having them look different to each other instead of simply being reskins all the time. When we take the gunplay and couple that with the quick hacking, that's when the combat is at its best. Now, it's going to take some time and effort in order to unlock different quick hacks, let alone all of them, plus upgrade your cyber deck from one of the Ripper docks so you can use them in a shorter amount of time. Now, I'm still acquiring more of these quick hacks, but distracting them with nearby machinery, reboot or short circuit their optics, throw a frag or EMP grenade as you dodge to the side, slowing down time for a brief period as you enter a clip into an enemy, switch to the shotgun, and you slide in to take another guy out. I've cleared out dozens of these areas of enemies, and it's still so enjoyable, even more so when I'm regularly getting new and improved weapons. The enemy AI is decent and does become more of a challenge at higher difficulties, especially in larger groups and if a netrunner is hacking you. And the only way to overcome these is to break the line of sight with you. And that goes for if any cameras can see you as well. It adds some depth to the combat when you upgrade and acquire more quick hacks and passive abilities that add even more depth. And this is without getting into the melee combat and how you can use katanas and all the blades as well, as that won't really become a part of my playstyle until the second playthrough, where I go for a different build. With so much gear coming in from dropped weapons and looting corpses, this can all be sold for extra Euro dollars, but more often than not, I disassembled it into parts, which I could use for upgrades down the track and with different classes of weapons, such as uncommon, rare, epic, legendary, and all these different parts will be needed if wanting to further enhance your weapons. I still need more time with this, but I did notice that so far, and keeping in mind I'm still on my first playthrough, I only upgraded a few weapons plus crafting items, due to thinking that I could just go take out some enemies and chances were I'd end up with a better weapon than upgrading what I already had. It's a good idea to do these things anyway, including the side missions, as if you want to purchase some of the cars on offer, even if you can steal cars as well, or buy new cyberdecks, which are a bit of a necessity if you're wanting to use quick hacks a lot and play on higher difficulties, then you're going to need a bunch of Euro dollars in order to do it. There are different clothing options in the game as well, and these are also in the common, rare, epic and legendary varieties, but I haven't really liked much of what I've seen on offer. But again, I do need more time with this, plus what can be done with upgrading these different types and the resources that goes into increasing their armor effectiveness. But since we're touching on what our character looks like, the actual character creator itself is good, but was expecting and wanting more in-depth options, as some areas such as hair or facial features don't have a lot of customization at all. There is a lot more to experience in the world of Cyberpunk 2077, and hopefully as I keep playing, the patches will keep hitting the game regularly to stabilize and improve performance. And then the quicker that is done for the various systems, CD Projekt Red can move on to adding content to the game and fleshing out other parts to make the world and the experience of playing it even better. There is no doubting that the launch of the game has been a letdown, and much of the issues would have been known about prior to release. Hence, early reviewers not being allowed to show their own footage and only PC versions of the game being given to review as well. Overall though, at the moment for myself, Cyberpunk 2077 is an absorbing and fun RPG adventure with a beautiful world to explore and an engaging and intriguing story and a great cast of characters, even though I do want to keep seeing how deep these RPG mechanics actually go. I've waited a long time for anything remotely with a Blade Runner vibe, and this is filling that hole. But the issues with bugs and crashes needs to be fixed and should have been before launch, or CD Projekt Red should have made the issues known to those looking to buy the game, especially those who were going to buy it on the PS4 and the Xbox One. I don't actually believe they would ever do this, but seeing as they didn't, they tarnished their reputation in releasing such a hyped game in the state it's in. It needs to be fixed and needs to be fixed fast. Unfortunately for those on last gen systems, I don't think any amount of work is going to deliver what you are after. So that's the video. Please let me know what you think of Cyberpunk 2077 down below and the issues you've had with it and the platform that you're playing it on. But please like, share, subscribe or comment, and I'll see you on the next video.